I'm Kevin Cox. I'm the organizer for tonight's event, along with my co-organizer, Vlad Schlossberg. And thank you all for coming. Yeah, all right. So thank you to our sponsors, Box, for hosting us here in the space. Dan, thank you for doing this. Also, I want to thank Focal, Vlad's company. They picked up all the food and drink. So drink and eat your way to thanks and customer love with Vlad and Focal. We're going to have a little talk from each of our sponsors. We're going to start off with Mike Linton from Focal. He's going to start you off, and I'll just turn it over to him.
As Kevin mentioned, my name is Mike Linton, and I function as the head of sales for Focal. What is Focal? Focal is a real-time bidirectional bridge between Slack, Microsoft Teams, email and chat, and a ticketing system. Basically, we take all the communications, all those hundreds of messages, and we bring them all into one place so that nothing falls through the cracks. I hope that makes sense. Focal does have its own ticketing system, so we can represent an end-to-end solution for some customers, but we also integrate with all of the major third-party ticketing systems that are out there. So whether it be Zendesk or Salesforce next door, or Jira, we can actually create a real-time bidirectional bridge between all of those platforms. And what does that mean for you and your team? What that means is you can work in the platform that you're most comfortable in. If you never want to leave Slack and you want to get a lot of work done, and you want to have, though, your other team members that might be in Jira or Zendesk or Salesforce and have it all update in real time, Focal can do that.
Welcome to Focal, where we transform your help desk experience with seamless Slack integration. Discover how effortlessly our tools streamline ticket creation and resolve queries with ease. First, let's create your help desk channel in Slack. Invite all your employees to the channel and make it the default for new hires. Next, invite and configure the Focal bot into your help desk channel. With Focal enabled, the floating channel menu becomes a useful part of your workspace, always available to create requests. Employees can simply click on Create Request from the floating channel menu. Depending on your setup, they'll see different request types, from simple drop-downs to complex forms with custom fields and attachments. Optimize efficiency with deflectable request types. When an employee has a question, our AI dives into your knowledge base or integrated platforms like Confluence and Notion to provide instant answers. Employees can view the AI-generated answer and the related articles. If further assistance is necessary, they can still create a request directly from this interface. In public mode, requests create a visible thread in your channel. It's perfect for sharing common solutions with all employees. For sensitive matters, private mode directs messages to the requester, ensuring the conversation remains confidential between them and the help desk agent. Once a ticket is created, Focal takes it a step further by sending automatic approval requests directly within Slack. Whether it's to a user's manager, a specific group, or an app owner, Focal manages the approval workflow effortlessly. Even if employees direct message your team, no worries. Hover over any message in Slack, click Create Ticket, and fill out the request type on their behalf. Experience seamless, efficient help desk operations with Focal and Slack. Empower your team and elevate your support process today. Visit focal.io to get started.
Thank you very much, and enjoy the panel.
My name is Dan O'Leary, Senior Director of Partnerships. I was one of the first folks that brought Slack to Box in 2015. I am a Salesforce Ranger, a Slack admin, a Slack champion. I really like Slack. I run my team and all of my partnerships on Slack. And we are really happy to have you here with us tonight. All right. So a little bit about Box as a Slack customer. As mentioned, we've been a customer for a long time. You go to slack.com. We are on their website. We are very happy to share what we're doing. 3,000 monthly active users In reality, those are like daily active users for us, minus some contractors, but like this is a critical business tool and application for us here. Interestingly, I thought some of you may find this interesting, 41% of messages sent in channels. So that used to be like 20%. So we've been continuing to get that going up and up as we get people used to working out loud. Hundreds of Slack connects, I stopped counting when I saw all the logos of many companies that we have in Slack connects. Hundreds of workflows you'll see in a second. Almost 25,000 files shared last month using Box for Slack. These are some of the workflows we use. I shared mine of the where's my lunch, but there's a lot of other ones we use, like who's on call if you are looking for SRE to help resolve a critical issue. If you're looking, like I use a lot of Slack connects, actually with Slack themselves as a partner and customer when we're working to team on an account or opportunity. So we're using workflows in Slack Connect channels, which is pretty cool. And we have somewhat opened up who can build and create and maintain these things. Like if you ask really nicely, like I have, you can, which is cool. And that's allowed us to have, thousands of bots that are doing everything from welcoming people to channels to heavy IT automation orchestration. Not quite where Focal is, and the demo you saw in the video is only a fraction of what that app can do. You should try to learn more. And Mike's great. Okay, next slide, please. So we're happy to show you these things, or if you ask Denise, the interoperability with Box makes it easy for enterprises to unify their files and then take action to accelerate their most important business outcomes. So don't take it from me. We think we're doing some pretty cool stuff, not only as a Slack customer, but also as a Slack and Salesforce partner. Next slide, please. So what does that look like? What does that mean? We have an awesome app called Box for Slack. How about that? Good news is it's included in your Box subscription. You not only not have to buy it, you already bought it. Congratulations. We'd love to help you turn that on and get some value from it. It's an awesome app. And what it does is it helps you share files in Slack auto-magically from Box. You drag and drop a file from your desktop, and rather than living in Slack, it now lives in Box, and all of the same permissions, file size, version controls, data residency, lifecycle, electronic signature, AI, all open up to you, and it's totally transparent to the end user. And as you saw, we have thousands of people doing tens of thousands a month, thousands of files a month using the same technology. We also have a notification interface in Box, because I don't know about you, but y'all, I do not want more email notifications. I'm happy to get those in the Box bot in Slack, which is super easy. Also, if you drag and drop a file, any files you share in Slack will auto-magically map to corresponding Salesforce records and folders. So the account team for the West sales team that's collaborating on a deal can automatically be added to a corresponding Slack channel. Or if you have a service case that gets spun up, having everyone on it in real time. If you enter the Slack channel, you have access to all the right content. You go into Box or Salesforce, same thing. It works super well. And it's allowing our users and many of our customers to massively accelerate how quickly they can respond to customer requests and add agility to their business. And as I mentioned, you already own this. We're going to talk a little about Box AI for Slack as well. Also included, what this allows you to do is talk to your files like you're talking to people, which is pretty cool. People are more interesting. They send better GIFs, apparently. But your files may have more interesting information, and not just one file, but a folder of 10 or hundreds or thousands of files. Could be policies. It could be, what I've been using this for personally is RFP responses. And I get a 900-page RFP from the state of Kentucky, and that's a lot to read, but it's real easy to ask Box AI and Slack to say, hey, is this a good fit for us? Before I go read this for an hour, can you just summarize it and then post it to the channel, and I'll tag my solution engineer and we can talk about it, which is really cool. So that is available now. You can go use it today. If you've not talked to your files, we'd happily help you do that. Next slide, please, Mr. Seth. Last thing is, it's not just Slack. Like, we are major Slack fans. Like, all of my laptop stickers are Slack and Salesforce stickers. This is my profile stickers, my Slack champion sticker. I'm a big, passionate person about this, but it's not just Slack. It's apps like Teams, it's Zoom, it's Microsoft, it's Google. It's more than 1,500 apps that we've integrated Box into as the content cloud. So no matter what app you're in, that file's in Box, one place to manage, store, protect it, which is great, especially as threat actors are everywhere, and our users are asking us to integrate this content into more and more tools and processes. No, thank you so much. I really do appreciate you could be here. As we are members of the community, we mentioned, hey, we'd love to host since we run our lives on Slack. And it's really cool to see all of you here, and we look forward to hearing your stories.
Next up, we're going to have our panel. Speakers, please come on. So we got two microphones. I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Vlad. And I just asked you guys, we have two, you just have to take turns sharing mics. We'll just pass them around and you'll figure out.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone, for coming out. So again, I'm Vlad from Focal. I had like a thing I was going to say, but I think Mike already did that, so I don't have to do that. So thank you to our esteemed panel. You know, I was kind of excited to do this. I was kind of thinking about this, and our panel is like, it's all IT, but it's also very diverse in terms of like background and industry and everything else. So kind of to start with that, maybe let's do a little bit of introduction. Just tell us, you know, who you are, where you're from. And also, since we're eating pizza, might as well, what's your favorite pizza place in the Bay Area?
Ooh. All right, I go first. My mind is a little slow right now. Just came back from Cancun last night, so forgive me. So my name is Erick Tewari. I'm CTO at the Lucky Foundation. And I just totally forgot the question. Okay, first about pizza. I remember the pizza. So my favorite pizza place is probably Zachary's Pizza in Berkeley, Oakland, and other parts of the Bay Area. Love Chicago-style pizza. I have my claim to fame with sharing the story of Zachary's Pizza is that 95% of the people that I've shared the glory of Zachary's Pizza with say it's their favorite pizza place after they eat it the first time. So if you're a fan of Chicago-style pizza, I do not work for Zachary's, but I love Zachary's, and I'll share it with you, and I'll tell you the awesome stories behind it. I totally forgot the other questions.
Who you are.
Oh, who I am. Who I am and what?
Who you are, where
Yeah. So I just found tangent about pizza. So how maybe you can go.
more about pizza than yourself.
That's true. Pizza's more interesting to me, so you can go ahead, Travis.
I'm Travis. Okay, we're good. We're good. I'm Travis Wright. I lead IT at Virta Health, which is a big telehealth company, and prior to that, leading IT at Teleport, privileged access management platform, and a few teams, engineering teams at Airbnb. In terms of pizza, one of my favorite topics, Arizmendi in the East Bay, wonderful workers co-op that only does vegetarian pizza. The sourdough crust, unbeatable. Sorry, but deep dish. I'm on the thin crust one. There's one in the Mission as well, yeah.
I'm going to be stuck on this pizza question for a bit. My name is Brian Wilkins. I am a senior IT engineer at Andreessen Horowitz. Some of you have heard of them, some of you haven't. Geez, favorite pizza?
Pizza place.
Pizza place. I mean, I believe I have tried Zachary's, but it's been a while, so that effect may have worn off a little bit. I remember when I was much younger, wandering on Berkeley, there was a Blondie's pizza. Does anybody remember that? Yeah, you go there in the middle of the night and get a pizza slice the size of Arkansas, and hope it's not windy outside because it would fly you into the air, and that was a pretty good one. I just wanted to say a different thing other than there's also a Bombay pizza over in Fremont. They actually offer a vegan cheese on their pizza sometimes, if you ask.
Cool. I actually didn't mention. I think that my favorite pizza place, I think, is Doppio Zero. I think is the one on Hayes. I think that's the one it's called. But it's like kind of on the corner, and they have. I think my thing with pizza is that if I walk in and they have like an old school pizza oven that gets to like a couple of, like 900 degrees, that place can be good. But definitely the most important topic that we're going to talk about today is pizza. So now that we're done that part, I think let's move on to something a little bit less interesting, the IT stuff, and and then kind of how it connects to Slack. So I think one of the things that I've, from my perspective around like Slack and IT and stuff is that Slack is being seen as this kind of entry point where historically people would set up things like, Jira, where you set up like a dashboard where people can go in and create requests of like what they want to do, right? Like they need a password reset, they need access to some kind of software, whatever it is. So what we're seeing, and I think what we're seeing over time is that that's slightly shifting to instead of, going to these systems like Jira, that's kind of shifting inward towards Slack, right? And so I kind of wanted to kick it off, Travis. Actually, I think when talking about this initially, you had some numbers around this, and you kind of saw where this is going. So please tell us about what you're seeing as this shift.
Yeah, I started using Slack for IT purposes when I joined Teleport. So I joined them really early while they're at like seed stage in the Series A, and I was the only We didn't have IT. I was just one of the first hires doing a bunch of engineering work. We had no IT staff. And so I didn't love Jira. I'd used it at every other company I had been at. And so I just thought, like, let's just not, we were a really big GitHub company. So we're like, just message. I just created a channel. This is just says IT help desk. And I just used the built-in Slack workflows and just respond to those. And we'll just see how far we go. And it actually worked fine for a small company until we're like, hey, we actually have to get audited. So we actually need a ticketing platform. And because of my reluctance against Jira, I was like, all right, let's do something different. And I had found this company called Help, which has now been bought by Atlassian. And we just set that up with no ticket backend because it could just do it itself. And you just ask questions. And I was really surprised in, we did set up an email responder and later we hooked it up to Zendesk and all things. And the stats always showed that it was like 90% of people came to Slack, which blew my mind because I was really worried because people are used to doing this private way that you open a Jira ticket. It's not but the Slack channel is just public. Anybody can see what you're asking. And when we later introduced email and we introduced Zendesk, people are going to switch, but they didn't because I'm like, people won't want to have all their questions in public, but they actually were totally fine with that. And it had these second effects that I didn't really expect was that people started threading their requests that they're like, this app is down. And instead of I get a bunch of tickets from everyone because it's all in private, they just started adding onto the thread. They're like, oh yeah, me too, me too, me too. And then this was the part that made me so happy, especially when I was the lone IT person and then we hired some more people. We were still a very lean team. Other people in the company started answering questions for us that they just saw that someone's like, oh, how do you do this? And somebody else answers because it's a public channel. And it was like, this is great. I'll just sit back and kind of watch this happen. And the trend kind of stuck that it's basically everyone wanted to use Slack all the time. And I don't blame them. I mean, emails full of spam at this point is a mess and it's slow. And it's people, I think everyone here that has worked in IT knows that even if you have Jira or you have Zendesk, people just DM you anyways. And it's really annoying because if you're an audited company, you're like, please, you have to do the ticket. We've got metrics and we've got compliance and you please open a ticket. But they just keep DMing you anyway. So just giving up on the thought that just meet the users. They want to be in Slack. So just give them a way to talk to you in Slack that, allows you to take the metrics, allows you to still meet all your compliance requirements and just meet the users where they are, and they really like Slack.
It's funny because you're mentioning it's a different definition of shadow IT, where instead of people are bringing in stuff to IT, they're just doing IT things and answering questions for you. So
right. The shadow IT I never expected.
Yeah.
If that could scale up, I'll just sit back and it'll be good.
Yeah. So and I think so I wanted to kick it off. Brian, you kind of mentioned you had a slightly different version of this, especially I think you're in more or both kind of regulated environments, but slightly different regulated environments and stuff. So I think you have a slightly different perspective on this, but it sounds like it's changing a little bit.
Yeah, I'll trade the word perspective to just the story of it because without going into it, one of my previous companies that I worked for had a very similar experience to what you're describing. I'm not going to tell you who that company was. It was Gusto. It was a payroll company. And but now I work for A16Z. And for me to be vulnerable and tell you, can I have the pinky swear from everybody right now? Just we're just talking right now. Everybody, pinkies up. Thank you, everybody. Okay, thank you. The culture within the firm that I started with 3 years ago, that is now a little bit different as we've hired so many people into the firm, was not very entertained by going to Slack. It was almost an opposite experience. And I was very surprised by that because this was very successful. The same experience was very successful at my previous company that I didn't mention. And so we tried it and we did some testing with it and it didn't work. And so the feedback we got was like, no, we want to do it the other way. And so we continued with an email integration, email communication. So it just didn't piece in. But now, and just to counter the perspective on it, I'm actually starting to, my perspective watching this actually may have started when you and I started talking about this, and it's this exact panel, is I'm watching little channels start to pop up where people are actually circumventing our official ticketing system by going to Slack and just getting the right people in the room, including the IT and different offices, to ask for certain things to be done. And I'm starting to see that shadow ticketing happening, which is exactly what this product, Focals, is trying to solve, trying to get around it. So it was interesting to listen to my internal customers, if you will, where I had almost the exact opposite experience. And I had to listen to that because if I tried to force this other piece down, it was going to be a bad experience at the time.
That's an interesting problem to have where it's just like you have the other shadow IT of like people creating shadow tickets. That's okay. That but it's interesting that it's like it sounds like the challenge is there, right? Like the pain is there that people kind of are expecting. It sounds like that more and more people are expecting Slack, so it's like the guard is kind of changing there a little bit.
Yeah, when I was hired 3 years ago, there was a number of people that existed at the firm before me, and that number has shrunk quite a bit. And so I believe the new people that we've hired since then have created a different culture and different dynamic of people that may have come from other companies that have actually entertained a Slack-focused communication method to kind of keep that going around, especially at like my previous company I didn't mention. It was Gusto, it was a payroll company. And Gusto had thousands of employees. And so it made sense to start finding an efficient way to communicate. And so I almost have to go on an internal marketing campaign to talk about these features and put them in.
So Eric, how about you? I mean, you're kind of working in a bunch of different environments and you like nonprofits and all this other stuff. How about what are you seeing kind of either in either current environments or previous places? Like what are you seeing in terms of like our employees generally using email? Like have you seen people kind of switching or kind of migrating?
Yeah, I just actually remember a few years ago, I attended, I think it was actually a Mac Admins event where it's kind of similar, where it was actually sponsored by a company called Ask Spoke. It's, if anyone remembers here, it was probably one of the first Slack-based ticketing systems. And when we saw the demo, we're blown away, like, wow, you can integrate this all within Slack? I mean, ticketing systems before that was just like, hey, you had to go to the web portal or submit an email to create a ticket. And it was a lot of back and forth to get help and a lot of things that could be improved where had the same type of that response level within Slack versus other communication methods. And at a previous company where I may be wearing some of their products right now, that hopefully buy some more so the stock price goes up. Yeah, when we implemented Spoke, it was a big success because people love Slack and they want to do all their work within Slack. And so when we introduced that, people were like submitting tickets in there, and there was some light AI in there, or machine learning actually, so we can help match some of the questions that people had with help with wiki articles that we had. And so like that was very successful. And then the success of our team implementing it, it generated demand from other units like the people team, like legal, finance, who said, hey, this is really cool. We want to use this too. And it was so easy to use that the teams, like we just basically said, hey, all right, this is how you set it up. This is what to do. And it was so straightforward that, that the teams were like, hey, all right, thanks, we know what to do. And then they were be able to use Slack for ticketing systems and for help. And so it was a really big success. And so with my experience using Slack, if we're a Slack-based company, like they love it. They love using it all in one interface, getting the help that they need. Yeah, it's definitely streamlined. There's some other tangents I can go on, but I think for later on question, we can talk about more.
Cool. So switching gears a little bit, one of my favorite things is to talk about like automation and kind of self-service. And one of the things that we kind of realized by kind of polling customers and seeing in general, and I think talking to people, is about 60% of all the requests that are coming in are really just within like 10 buckets, right? It's like access requests, hardware requests, password, onboarding, offboarding, a handful of other ones, right? So it sounds like those are kind of a lot of times being the ones that you want to automate and kind of forward and stuff. Now Slack obviously has a bunch of options to do that. They have the kind of the workflow builders and all of that stuff. Then there's systems such as Focal that do things like that. But I guess from that perspective, like just going down the line, what are your kind of strategies on automation? And also, how do you get started, right? Like if people didn't or don't have automation today, maybe they have some form of a ticketing, maybe they don't have any ticketing at all more, maybe they have crazy ticketing and now they're just trying to figure out how to make it more streamlined. What are the things that you kind of think about when you're talking about like automating and making things more self-service and more flow, to make it so that like you can kind of reduce ticket counts, whatever. So I'll take it from there and stop going on a tangent. So let's just go down the line.
Yeah, just one thing I'm thinking about was, since a lot of folks like to use Slack and trying to have it all in one place, I always think about, all right, what's the experience like when folks need help? How do they open tickets? Do they use a slash command? Do they use emoji, or do they use the app to create a ticket? Getting that feedback is really important, and also socializing it, because there are folks who are completely new to Slack that you need to help teach them on how to use slash commands, how to use Slack apps, how to add apps, how to do X, Y, and Z, how to open a ticket to IT. And so teaching it is very, very, it's very easy to do that within Slack. It's really like, all right, this is what to do. And it's just a few clicks here and there. And folks have been able to use a ticketing system right away. Actually, one thing I was just thinking about was having it all in one application is so amazing. Like actually, when I did a demo of Focal last year at a previous company, I was one of those customers or prospective customers that was actually like almost like clapping like that Brazil customer saying, wow, Focal can do all this automation within the app. Let's just say there's a company at a previous company, we had a big need to automate our expense management. So when you say you need to purchase like something like Salesforce and you have all these different contracts you have to go through, redlining, you have to get not only IT approval, legal approval, finance approval, and maybe exec approval, depending on the level of spend. And at the time, I only knew of one application can do it, and I don't know if I should call them by name, but they're just very expensive. They can go in 6 figures, and so we implemented it. I mean, I basically got feedback from other stakeholders, said, hey, this solves our need here. We implemented it, definitely quite a bit of investment to implement it. And then when I learned about Focal, it's like, holy smokes, it can do everything that this application can do without that extra 6-figure cost. And I was amazed. I was amazed that Focal can do that, and that you can basically build all this automations and workflows to do spend approvals, to do onboarding new applications, to do even some of the things that Okta does within their totally forgetting the name of that product right now. It's on the tip of my tongue right now, but the one that you could basically request application access. So that's something to me that I really appreciate, and I know end users appreciate it because it helps reduce the amount of complexity for them to get help, and for us to even help them as well. Because hey, we just have to open up the Slack app. We know the status of a ticket, or we know how to raise a ticket or respond to it within the application, versus some of the old school, well, I shouldn't say old school, but different ticketing systems that you have to log into the application to respond. You don't know what the status is until you actually log in. You may get some notifications, and you have no idea what what is actually happening within the request. Yes, yeah, exactly. So yeah, definitely appreciated for products like Focal. So
thinking about automation, like Vlad mentioned, an interesting one of like focusing on the right problem is pretty key. Like there's this principle, the Pareto principle, that 80% of the problems, it's like a classic industrial engineer one, can be solved by, or 80% of the problem can be solved by 20% of the things. And if you look at help desk stats, it's almost always true. Like you can categorize your tickets and you'll realize, and like access was always one of the biggest ones. Like, learn that very much working at Teleport where we're doing access management. So when you think about automation, like solving the right problem first is really key. And this is a non-Slack answer, but when you're working on automation problems, the highest form of automation is actually the magic that was so behind the curtain, you didn't even have to ask for something. So I was doing a bunch of interviewing recently and like talking to companies, like, what metrics do you care about? And I'm like, one metric I want to tell you I absolutely do not care about, and is number of tickets closed. Because a lot of companies are like, how many tickets are you closing? I'm like, that doesn't matter, because every single ticket is a mistake that IT made. That it's like we should have, someone's like, hey, I need access to this. My computer's not working this. Those were all things we should have done correctly. And like every time you come to help desk is a mistake that we made. Like we should have had better onboarding docs. We should have had better documentation. We should have automatically given you access to all those things that you need. And like a little like tip for folks that are maybe IT managers that have to deal with like the budgets of this stuff. When you automate shit, you need to put how many tickets did we dodge by doing this. So it's like when you're like, hey, like one of the easiest automations you can do is like Okta admins, smart groups, put people in the right groups, they have access to the right thing. You're like, how many tickets did it take to do that? To go put all the people in those things? Tons. And it's like, you need to justify your budget in that way. But you're not going to get everything. Like there are going to be reasons that people come to the help desk. And when they do, that's where like self-service is so critical, that you want to move down this automation ladder of being like the automatic things that happen behind the curtain. No one even had to ask. Then the self-service things that like, hey, I can solve my own problem. And finally, those high touch things that IT has to help. And, when I worked at Teleport, self-service became this huge problem because we were a small team and we're an international company. We had people all over the world, and literally all our IT staff was always all on the West Coast. We had a few folks in the IT or in like East Coast, but it was like all US based. So meaning if you were anywhere else in the world, you had to play this horrible game of ultra slow ping pong where you send something, and especially when you're just asking for more, like what is a very simple conversation normally that you have on Slack. And I think this was one of those things that like was a game changer on a Slack help desk over like Jira, is that like asking for more information, that like there's usually a few back and forths that have to happen before you have enough info to actually get them the thing they wanted. And Slack helps that like conversationally, but what if you're in different time zones? Like what if that, and so it's like, that's where it's like, okay, a Slack bot can start to ask you the right questions or suggest you of being like, hey, did you check out this documentation? Did that help? Okay, no. Like, okay, let's, get you a time booked with someone in IT. So it's like those self-service things are really important. And I think the real magic that I'm hoping to do in the future is these forms that drive automation, that like, hey, if you filled out the form, we send that, we make an API request and we do the thing, and it becomes a zero touch IT ticket. And, going back to that, like, hey, if you have to play these dumb budget games when you're asking for things from your company, I did this at Teleport. We actually had looked at like how many tickets are done by like the IT robot. I forget what we named the IT robot there. Like my current company is the same. We call it IT robot. How many tickets are opened by IT robot? How many tickets are closed by the IT robot? And it's like, you can then look at that and like, this is a member of our team that's actually doing a lot of work. And, one of the big philosophies that when I joined Teleport was that I want to be like a DevOps team, that we make automation. We make platforms. We're not a service team that just turns the wheels, because then we can be engineers that make cool stuff. And it's like showing that data. They're like, hey, this is how many tickets we dodged by just pointing people, by doing automation, that we had like middleware handling the robots. And actually that was a really good point about how much cheaper middleware's got. But yeah, I've worked on some unnamed solutions that have been bought by that tower over there that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. And now Okta workflows, if you're not using this, oh my God, dude, it's so cheap, and it does probably 90% of what the big middlewares do. And take the metrics, it's like show your boss that it's like, hey, our IT robot is doing all these requests and is like a big part of the team member, because it's like, that's how you get engineering talent on your team, is that like, hey, we want to be a team of engineers because that's how you scale. That's how you solve problems. We don't want to be a team of being like, we just take requests and we manually turn the wheels and we close them. And it's never been a better time you have more tools than ever for self-service to do this. And I think in terms of like the engineers that we want to be and the technologists that we want to be, I don't think anybody wants to be there day after day, just taking requests and clicking and pointing and doing that stuff. Like, that's not how you get promoted. That's not how you move your career forward. Like, we want to build cool stuff as engineers, and you know, self-service is a way to do that. That we, you know, you fill out the form and we send the API request and the message is done. And if you're a team that's judged heavily by metrics, and we'll probably talk more about metrics in this discussion, is to be like, that hacks your metrics like no other. It was like, oh, time to ticket close, it was 0. Or maybe, you know, it's like almost 0, that it's like, it took 30 seconds for the bot to go and you submit the form and the webhook to come back and we submit the response. And we're like, you know, you want to see your ticket metrics like improve dramatically? It's like, yeah, put a few automations in and like suddenly you're like, oh yeah, we closed this ticket in 30 seconds. There's no competition to that. And it's like that impresses, I think, you know, like no other, that it is worth it to do these self-service automation like tasks.
I was relating to these stories here. Remind me really quickly the direct question I need to answer here. So the integrations with Slack, the self-service pieces, the shift left, is that a universal term? And I was relating to slow ping pong, and I
Painful.
anyway, wish I could challenge somebody. Kind of relating to the original story I told earlier about the interesting culture I was dealing with at the firm, also played a big part into where I could land and stick any of these integrations, any of these shift left opportunities. There's lots of great features that a lot of companies, sometimes competitors of Focal, sometimes not directly competitors of Focal, but also trying to integrate with Slack. Box just did a little demonstration right here of their integration with Slack and things that they can use to help collaborate through Slack, some efficiency with the information that we're playing with. And there's no bad ideas. None of them are bad ideas. But if you integrate, if you whatever I put together at that company that I used to work for that I didn't name, Gusto, what worked there doesn't necessarily translate to what's going to work at my new company. And I'm going down this tangent for a reason, but like when I interview people to hire, it's really important that they express to me the understanding that we can be experts in all the technology across the technology world, but we have to understand how it's being implemented here. And so I can totally agree and believe that what's working for you is working for all of you. And when I walk through the doors of my firm and try to implement the same things, I get a very different response, and sometimes it's confusing. So I have to take a step back and realize what works with shift left is if it's accepted as shift left. And so sometimes people want to go directly to Box, or they want to go directly to Confluence. And sometimes they want to use Asana, and sometimes they want to use ClickUp, and sometimes they want to use Jira. And is that maddening? Yes. But if the business reason, if the business value to whoever's using it is justifiable, then we support it, because if they're able to use it themselves, and this is where I can relate to something you just said about we're here to build a platform so that everybody can use it, not just so IT can pull the strings for everybody and do it. So the opportunity for our firm, and I'm going to loop back to the Slack integration and the ticketing system and the requests for help and whatnot. We had to figure out what our firm wants to, how they want to communicate with us. And so we put out all these opportunities. So you're going to email us, you're going to email me directly. Don't do that. That's not going to work. I had to learn to stop responding to those. And are you going to Slack us directly? And that unfortunately is working, because we hired a bunch of helpful IT people. I mean, that's part of the interview. It's like you need to be a personable, helpful person. And then they get these direct Slacks, and then they help them. And then people learn that you no longer need to send us an email anymore. Well, there's that opportunity. Is our IT team accepting a bunch of direct Slack messages asking for IT help to solve a problem? I'm glad they're solving problems, but where's my metrics? I can relate. We don't care about how many tickets we're getting. I care about if the business is running. And so is there an opportunity to now integrate a system I wish I can think of one that allows an IT person to push a button after a request right in Slack to say, I need a ticket out of this because I need the metrics. I need to categorize what this was. This was a new laptop request. This was a access request to a system. I need access to Salesforce. I need folders permission changed on Box. And I need to start measuring those. And I guess the bottom line that I'm trying to point out is sometimes it's not super obvious to the end users what they actually want, what they actually need. And sometimes it's not super obvious to the IT side of it, if you will, and even upper management. Like they don't know until you start to see it happening over and over again. And then you have this other category of metrics of like, this is what's happening. Let's put a system in place to take advantage of it and make that much more easy.
Well, I guess the one kind of thought there is that like so a lot of like kind of like the topic here is like around automation, right? And it sounds like for automation to be really successful, you kind of need people to use the right systems, right? And when they're DMing you, you're not going to get any automation. But I guess one kind of like side of that is like, well, when they're making these requests, is there certain things that you can do to just improve your own life as somebody in IT? So even if you are hand-holding and giving white glove support, where you're getting these requests manually, and maybe you're at a place where it's like no matter what, they're still going to DM you specifically. Is there things that you can be doing to like automate the flows on the back end so that you don't have to do as much work? Do you know what I mean?
Yes, and this is kind of a newer phase that we're observing. And so a while back, we did see the opportunity to put in a system like Vocal, and it was turned down because we couldn't find the customers within our firm to actually use it, and it was like tested. But I told her, like I mentioned earlier, it's like there's a whole bunch of people who have left. There's a whole bunch of people who got hired. There's a whole new culture now, and now like I feel like I have an opportunity to put it in, and that's kind of like what I'm. That's what I'm trying to say is like I need to start reintroducing this again to see if it'll stick.
By the way, none of this is a pitch for.
It's not a pitch, no.
For Salesforce, or this is a pitch for Slack, not for pitch for the building next door. Okay, so that makes sense. I guess
is our pinkies still up? Everybody's pinkies still up? Yep, thank you.
We're not talking about any gusto. I mean, don't know. So coming, kind of, I think we already talked about like metrics and some of this, like, ticket open and close rates and stuff. And I actually, one of the things I like, Travis, about what you said is that like a ticket is a mistake. We're talking to this company called Zilio, and they actually have like a interesting kind of similar theory where anytime that they create a ticket, anytime that a ticket comes into the door, they see that as an opportunity to like automate something. And they've gotten to the point where it's like they try to make sure they have 0 tickets. And it's not always automation. Sometimes it's just like videos and instructions and that kind of stuff. Sometimes it's that kind of content. So it's not necessarily just building systems, but it is like a ticket 0 kind of environment. I like that theory. But talking about metrics in general, I mean, if you're not looking at open and close rates, and I mean, it sounds like open and close rates is a bigger number that if you're including the kind of the automated close rates probably doesn't help much. But if you're looking at metrics in general, right? What are the metrics that actually do matter? And I'll kind of ask it from 2 perspectives. One is, what are the metrics that matter for kind of like talking about how your team is doing? And I think one of the other things that we hear a lot is that like the metrics that matter to help kind of grow the team, because I think a lot of times it ends up being like, yeah, your open and close rates end up, or the number of tickets created ends up kind of like correlating to like how many like headcount we hire. So yeah, just maybe go down.
I'll go reverse here. I'll keep mine short. For us, we learned that time to respond alone was the most important thing to our firm.
Is it first response or continuous? Like
both. It's everyone needs to move fast. There's pressures, and this is not unique to my firm. Every company has pressures. Every sales team has their own pressures. Every marketing team has their own pressures. So this is not, you can put your pinkies down for this one. Time to first response, time to respond to these requests, at least an update, at least something to tell them that we're working on it. And that became the most important part. So we actually started trying to measure that and actually put SLOs first, the undeclared SLA, our internal objective. And then eventually we did publish an SLA so that we can at least tell everybody, we believe we're capable of this and this is what we're going to hold ourselves to. So you have an opportunity to understand it might take an hour for us to get back to, let me say it nicer. It might take us up to an hour to get back to you. But yeah, the response piece was the most important metric. I'll keep it short.
Yeah, I agree with responses at the top. It's like if a ticket's a mistake, we can at least respond quickly. That like if you're having a problem, like you want it solved pretty fast. But when you do view tickets as a mistake from like that lens, you can look at it from some interesting ways. So this one was annoyingly hand calculated, but I used to look at how many tickets per new hire did we get in their first month? Because and I like that Vlad mentioned this low tech way of good documentation is actually a self-service automation. So I have someone on my team at Virta who was putting in these amazing onboarding walkthrough videos. And I was giving him so much props for doing these. I'm like, hold on, you got to go on and get me the view counts for all of these videos, because I'm like, that's how much time we saved for all of these things. It's like how you set up your MFA, how did you get your Okta account set up, all these ones. Show me how many people are watching them so that I can show, you know, our leads. Are like, these were all things that we used to actually do. This is one of the first things I had changed when we got there. Like we were doing all these like onboarding sessions where like live, we're going through, we're troubleshooting with people, and like, let's just do a video. And in the email where it's like, hey, go through all of these videos to follow through steps. If you have a problem with any of these, here's a Calendly link to go book some time with our IT folks. Here's how to open a ticket. And, you know, very, very quickly, we saw like the results like very, very fast. Like, oh, people are watching the videos and they're closing them. And like, that's an interesting metric that we don't think about. And it is a form of like self-service automation. And the one I'd like to get to in the future that I can't quite measure today is like, you know, how do I show that our documentation is actually dodging tickets? And I would love to do this in like a deflection way that like, hey, how often is this bot that is suggesting answers? And I would love to implement this at Virta. That and one thing I'd love to put on this implementation is that a question at the end that asks the person, did this was this helpful? That, or like ask them like, hey, would you like an automated suggestion from our documentation? And was that helpful? I guess we can tell from the close rate, did that work, or did we have to escalate it to a person? But that, you know, very clear indication that our documentation is working. And those are really cheap and easy ways to dodge tickets. And you know, like I said before, it's like the best automation is like you didn't have to set this up in the first place, but if you did, to be able to walk through it on your own. And now that I work in healthcare, you know, we have folks that are actually like brand new to Macs and they've never used them before, like, which is crazy coming from an organization that was like, most people are like, you know, Linux hackers. So it's like they're never asking computer questions to like folks that are like, how do I do any of these things on Mac? So it's like having those videos to show that, you know, the basics saves a ton of time from our IT team. And it was easy. It was free. And we could do this right away and we could measure the impact and show that like, oh yeah, we should record more videos. So I think that's a new metric that I'm hoping to look more at, is like how many tickets do we dodge because we gave you really, really good instructions.
As an aside, one of those things about deflection rates, was it actually successful or not? I think the problem that we've heard and we've seen is that like when you ask people, like you give them some kind of answer and then you ask them, was this helpful? Like most people don't answer that question. They just kind of just don't respond. They're like, already got my answer, bye. Bye, Eric.
I mean, similar answers to the other two here, but actually at a previous ticketing system, we did actually have the deflection rate. Like, right, did the wiki response actually provide the answer, or did they open a ticket afterwards? So that was actually really useful because we got to know, hey, was our wiki articles actually helpful, or did they open up a ticket afterwards? And so we learned from those metrics that the wiki content we had was actually very successful for most things. Or some things where you got to learn, hey, people open tickets because we didn't have enough documentation, or we didn't have documentation. So
how do you know they read it?
It was.
You went down to the bottom of the document, just log a ticket anyway. Like,
well, it was within. It was Spoke actually. It had, yeah. So it was wiki within there. Yeah, it was something. It was definitely very helpful there. Time to response. How long tickets are open for? Like I was at a previous company where I saw these. When I came in and there was tickets that are open for months. I was like, why are these tickets open for months? Like what? And just digging in deeper, like, okay, is this actually a break fix issue? Is this a request, or is this actually a project? And trying to deep dive in that and trying to move it to the appropriate location. I think those type of metrics are very important. I'm definitely not a person that says, all right, we need to have this amount of tickets closed. It's really, are we helping our end users be successful? Like the view that I have as an IT leader is like, are we empowering our end users and helping them with whatever needs that they have? And so as long as people are getting the help that they need and getting it in whatever ways that they need to. Some people love to contact IT and get help step by step. Some people love to just help themselves. And so, and there's people that are in the middle as well. So helping folks with whatever communication style that they have is very key, and Slack is definitely a big part of that. And also having you may have other applications like Notion, for example, that you want to integrate it within Slack, and you want to be able to search for your content and answers within Slack versus actually having to go into Notion or some other system like Notion to find those answers. And having it within Slack, is very important. Or having a something like Focal that can be the in between to get that information is extremely helpful.
Actually, one of the interesting things is Spoke users were the ones that I talked to, and they also a lot of times said, because Spoke had a metric of like how much deflection they provided, and then how many of them were like answered correctly or not, and how many of them even answered the question. And I remember the most people said only something like 20 or 30% of the time did people actually answer that question. So most of the time people just didn't answer the question of if it actually is helpful or not. And I think part of that depends on kind of the interface and everything else. But one of the interesting things I think nobody mentioned was kind of like CSAT, NPS, that kind of stuff. Is that kind of relevant? Do you care about what people think about you?
I mean, it's definitely a part of it. We look at it like I was at a company we actually had 100% CSAT score, which was fantastic. We had a great team, so like that was some really kudos to the team. And but also like part of it is not just the statistics, but also like seeing what people actually like feel about IT. Are we helping them? Is there anything that we can help them with? Having that relationship with the various stakeholders at the company is very, very important. So cultivating that along with the statistics is golden for me.
Yeah, one of the CSAT that's interesting is so I got to my new company, and one of the metrics that they're measuring was the CSAT, and Zendesk would put this out as a like a binary of like, was this good or bad? And they had been celebrating these like 90% CSAT wins, and as I had noticed, I realized that the response rate was incredibly low. And then I had launched a survey, using our surveying tool that's more of like, hey, give me a 0 to 10 ranking of being like things like, I feel like IT quickly responds to my issues. IT listens and understands my problems. IT quickly resolves my problems. The survey did not indicate that we had 90%. And I think there's this like, people get guilty, especially when it's like, oh, I just got helped by this person, to say, oh, that was 100% bad. No one wants to say that. Like it's like really, it feels bad. So it's like the anonymous survey had a very different result. So it's like, okay, I want to use these surveys, and we can't conduct those that often, but like we do get good details and interesting anonymous comments on those as well. But I think one of the things I want to change on that is like, you have to have a scale on like the happiness on this, that it can't just be thumbs up, thumbs down. Like it's got to be something in the middle around this, and you have to take with a grain of salt, because most people don't answer it anyways. So it's like, if you're looking at CSAT, I think you should also be doing a surveying that is anonymous at like maybe once or twice a year. Quarterly might be a little excessive, but I think you might be surprised with the results when people can speak candidly about those. And also one of the early things I did starting this new job was I talked to like all the managers I could, and I asked them like those same questions, and I did not get the answers that like, oh, IT is moving fast on these things. No knock on, we have an incredible IT team. We are ridiculously understaffed. But so it's like they're doing the best they can and hustling all the time, but that means that things don't always get answered quickly. But people do not want to like do that, because it's like they did get helped by this person. So they view that as the binary of being like, yes, the person solved my problem, like that 10% is usually only on the like, no, they actually did solve it, which is another metric I didn't mention that is really important is reopen rate. That when you see that like, oh, the IT person thought we solved it, didn't actually solve it. So I think, yeah, survey folks, look at reopen rate and like definitely do it in an anonymous way. And also have those side conversations with like your key stakeholders to like get that candid feedback so you can really, really dig in on what their problems are.
The reopen rate. That's a good idea. I don't know where to go with that one.
Well, I think the question was like, do you care about what your people think about?
No. We're still under pinky swear. I think our first attempt at some type of CSAT was rejected. They didn't care. They were happy enough with our service. They were happy we were there, and they didn't want to dive into it any further than that. If they had a problem with what we're doing, they would tell us. But they didn't want this extra step that came into the process, and it was that was an interesting observation. It was like it's a whole different dynamic of a culture there, and so we had to go back to the other means, kind of the previous conversation of the time to respond, for example. We were getting feedback on that, so we had to glean that CSAT type information from other avenues of like when people are saying this is taking too long, and they would redirect, or they would contact our boss, or they would contact somebody else saying I have this ticket in, it's not whatever. And so like we would all meet as a team and talk about all the feedback we were getting from these other corners. And the biggest one of the feedback, it was reactive to that. We started seeing over and over again that people were reactive to how fast we were getting to our tickets. And so we had to train ourselves like, okay, guys, let's get ourselves in a place where we can actually get to our tickets on a cadence. And that feedback started going away. So we're solving it a different way, but a mechanical CSAT, and something to put out there to request it. And I was going to ask about like somewhere in the middle. So I could pick a number between 1 and 10, but the only options are 3, 4, and 7. Right? So that wouldn't work either. Yeah, it didn't work. We couldn't put it out.
Well, only prime numbers as a CSAT.
Yeah.
Thanks. So I kind of want to open it up. If anybody has any questions, either, I don't know, I guess we're small enough you can shout it out, or I don't know, raise your hand or something. I guess maybe to start off, anybody have some questions they want to ask the panel? I'll come to because it's loud.
I'm always curious what people are reading, and everything that you guys have I'm not in IT. I'm got thrown into operations.
Everyone's in IT. Everyone is.
Oh, okay, good to know. Well, now I'm being thrown into IT. I'm in a startup, and we've gone ultra lean recently. So now I'm wearing like 20 different hats and just discovered rippling and everything else. But essentially, I'm super curious if you read any of those O'Reilly books, and like the little ones that you can read in like an afternoon. And if you have, which ones would you recommend? Because like I read Chaos Engineering and I thought it was so fascinating. So that's
Echo one of it.
Please.
There's a book I've had a team read before, and I'm recommending to some folks. Is like the Phoenix Project is like an industrial engineer like classic, and now they have the Unicorn Project. And it's not an O'Reilly book. It's like trying to get you to look at the philosophy of solving problems and being process focused on things. And it's told in a narrative way, which I really like. Some people don't because it moves very slowly because there's characters and plot. But I think if you read it, it makes you feel like you want to be a change champion at the company, that you're just like, every book starts with, this company is organizationally dysfunctional, and you're the hero to solve it. And I just really like the principles that they put in there. That it's like it's not they do especially in the Unicorn Project like preach a lot of things about GitHub and like, but it's mostly about this like philosophy around solving problems, and like you'll get nods to some of those old industrial engineering concepts like the Pareto principle, and like focusing on the right problem, focusing on process and people. And I like those ones there because it's I think Eric talked about this. Brian talked about this. That it's like every organization, it's like getting the change in and like actually getting people to use what you want can often actually be harder than doing the thing. And as like a lot of technology people, like we're usually like pretty good, hopefully, at like implementing the technology and like, you know, stereotype a little bit here, but we're often pretty bad about like socializing that and like being the champion and like leading change at a company is really, really hard. So I think, you know, that book definitely like helps inspire. I like definitely, you know, giving it to one of the star engineers on my team that's just like, okay, this is how you lead big change. Like read this and you'll maybe hopefully be inspired.
Do you have a thought or? Not too much. Okay, let me take one. I also want to offer some kudos. The many hats, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I'm already in envy of you of probably all the work you're doing for your company. I'm happy you're here at an event like this where we can talk about a lot of these concepts. The one book I read, it might sound a little out of bounds. It was actually one of those. It was called Site Reliability. It was Google. It was a Google book called Site Reliability, and they talked about a lot of technical things about how Google works on the back end on all their crazy self-made servers. But then they started talking about how they make changes, and that was the piece that really resounded with me. Is they allow a certain amount of downtime, and if your change causes downtime, it better be on budget, because if we already have some downtime because of other things, your change ain't happening this year. Your change is happening next year when we have downtime budget again. That's the simplest way to say it. And that resounded with me, and also with any change, with any system being put in, one of the pieces that resounded nicely with me with various IT leadership that I've worked with is they make a point to say everything's an experiment. Nothing's personal. Nothing's so embedded in the work that we're doing. We have to set the stage that we're going to try it. We're going to implement it. It's an experiment. If it works, we document why it works and we keep going. If it doesn't work, we document why it didn't work and we keep going. And so rolling back to my earlier story, I tried putting out a mechanical CSAT. It didn't work. We documented why it didn't work and we kept going. But later, and especially with like are we only emailing for IT support, or now are we possibly using Slack now to ask for IT support? Back then, it didn't work, and we documented why, and we kept going. But now it might change, and so we can review that documentation and be like, well, it didn't work for X, Y, Z. I think we can try it now because things have changed. Slightly off topic, you know, but I was hoping it would be helpful.
I love that SRE handbook, and like I was doing a SRE like team at Airbnb, and we all read that handbook, and I love that everything is experiment. And a ticket metric that would also love to mention, and actually Emily, who used to work for me at Teleport, really helped on this one, which was like we introduced a new MFA way, because it's like we used to look at the ticket metrics for like the old MFA that we used, and I won't name it because we're in their building, was not very good. Or actually, sorry, we actually changed to the one that we are in their building. The unnamed one by another giant was not very good, and we got so many tickets from this one. It's just like, I'm having trouble with this company's MFA thing, and we switched. And one of the big metrics that I was putting on Emily, who was doing all this user documentation and like getting everything set up, was that like, how many tickets are we gonna get when people switch over? And then after they switch over, are we gonna have less tickets for the new MFA thing, or are we gonna have more? So it's like that experimentation culture of being like, that I think, yeah, the underseen part that, you know, I think, you know, Brian and I are both talking about is that like, can you lead that change from like a philosophical level as well as a system level? And then can you prove it after the fact that you're like, no, this was actually better. And like, we've got the data to show that like, this is causing less problems than it used to before, because like change is really, really expensive. And like, you really don't want to do the back of the napkin math of like how long it took your team to put a change in. So it's like, you definitely want to have some results you could point to of like, was it actually worth it to kind of move mountains to make this happen? And yeah, if you can lead change at a startup, like you will move very fast.
What about you, Eric? Any favorite books?
Not necessarily about IT. So I could just say based off my experiences, I mean, I don't really have anything about IT in general for my favorite books wise, but oh,
Ender's Game by Orson Scott.
I have Jurassic Park. I mean, there's quite a bit of books out there. Let's just say that. But I think it's really when you are wearing multiple hats. Where I've been like the very first IT person or one of the first IT people at a company, you are really wearing tons of different hats, and really it's about how you organize your daily work and how you think, because IT is not just like like closing tickets, for example. There's the engineering side of things. There's project manager side of things. There's the
Well, question, if I could expand on our question, just for you actually, is what was important to you then when you were that first IT person wearing those multiple hats? What was important then compared to like now where you may have a more developed team?
Yeah, I mean, I think really is just having foundations. So having, for example, having a ticketing system, having an HRS system. I've was at a company where our HRS system was literally a Google sheet with everyone's personal information on there. And
That was happening?
yeah, was that? Oh, not,
I imagine. Okay.
yeah, and so yeah, that was something where I came in. And it was a very notable company that this was happening at, and I was like, why are we having all this PII in a Google sheet and shared with all these random people that have nothing to do with the people team? And yeah, basically understanding why that was the case, and basically assigning basically I wanted to take charge in implementing that change, and I actually had the bandwidth to take on this project and met with all the various stakeholders to say, all right, let's implement an HRS system. What are our requirements? And take the lead on that project. And so I totally forgot what I was talking about that, but I think really wearing multiple hats. So like if you're working on particular projects, I block out my calendar and say, all right, this is XYZ time for project work, or this is XYZ project time for break fix. Whatever it is, I try to organize how I think that way, because it's very hard to switch context on several things that you're working on. And so blocking that time off for the specific type of work helps me tremendously. Otherwise, I would go crazy. And so being organized is very helpful. It's very helpful in being successful at a startup where you're wearing a ton of different hats. And then also really when you have the opportunity to hire or to delegate off the work or whatever you want to call it, it's how do you learn to do that? Because you may be doing something that you really enjoy, and now you may be hiring someone.
You measure for the hat, right?
Yeah, yeah. So like, all right, this is your responsibility, and then giving them the responsibility and letting them run with it. Not, I'm not a micromanager, but like I want them to be successful, and it's like, oh, that was my baby, and now it's like someone else's now. So, learning to let go, I think is really important too. So, just my thoughts right there.
It's funny that you say multiple hats, because I actually got on a call with a guy once, and he was on a seat, and next to him was literally like 6 or 7 different hats, and it had different things that it was like a founder guy, and he had like sales, marketing, like whatever, and he had different hats on. And while I was on a call with him, he switched his hat while I was talking to him. Like, that's cool.
I approve.
Thank you. So one of the challenges with some of these tools is they're often only as good as the knowledge that they have access to. And I'm curious to hear from you all in your automation journey. Do you find yourself shifting more and more time away from answering tickets and towards writing and maintaining documentation? And how do you kind of keep a handle on that?
Are you talking about ChatGPT, or are you talking about our? I'm trolling you a little bit, but.
Sure. Yeah.
We actually have this exact project going on within our firm, so I'll answer quickly myself. In the same way that we had multiple systems that seem redundant, multiple ticketing systems, multiple project management systems, we had to kind of figure that out. We had to figure out also where do people want to find information, and we started entertaining a feature like what Full Call has about integrating with a knowledge base, but we got to choose what that knowledge base was. And we put it in an easy place for people to find. There's some custom-made bots I think we've made for Slack where different teams can be able to use the bot to ask questions, and that bot knows what access that person has. And so you have to understand at A16Z, we're SEC regulated. There's a lot of information that people should know and a lot of information that people should not know. And never mind, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about here, but it's important about the segregation of security within that piece as well. And so it partially answers, I want to touch upon that with your question a little bit about good data versus bad data or controlling data and making sure there's not good or bad information in there. What we're looking for now is a way for anybody to fill out that form of wiki, the knowledge base articles that we can have within our firm. Confluence is a really easy one. We've all heard of it and it's fairly easy to use, but there's other competitors to Confluence. It doesn't have to be an Atlassian product. And one other problem that I think we're trying to solve is old articles that are no longer relevant, that are outdated, that are wrong now, and being able to find those and fish them out of wherever they come from. And sometimes they're Google Docs, sometimes they're Box files, and sometimes there are articles in Confluence. And so there's a lot of cleanup that we have to do. If I understood your question correctly, it was like, how do we monitor that? Is that kind of? Yeah, the answer is yes. That's a great question. I don't think I have a good answer. I want to ask for help on this one.
I think one of the ones is like well, first I want to make sure that no one is like on too much help desk time. Like I'm very strict on the schedules that you actually have time to work on projects, because it's like you want to do automation, you want to do this other stuff. And celebrating those like wins. I used to go through all the wiki stats and like find who's doing the most articles and stuff like that. So I could see how many, and like I give an example of like someone on my team who's like wanted to launch these videos. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Let's get the numbers off those videos, so that, you know, we can celebrate that. So it's like, you know, it's just kind of giving them that time of being like, hey, I don't want you to spend all your time on help desk, because that means we're never actually solving the problems. We're just like stopping the bleeding the whole time. So it's like, I want to make sure that like, hey, you've got this time when you're, and also when we're measuring those metrics of like response time, it's like, you got to be on it, like while you're on shift. But when you're not on shift, it's like, I want to make sure your schedule's pretty clear. You've got times to do that. And that when they're like, hey, I want to work on this documentation stuff, that are like, I celebrate that. You're like, yeah, let's do it. Like, this could be a big thing. And like, let's get the stats off this and show that like, yeah, this made a big impact. And I wish those stats could be a little bit better, because it's like, I do know that people are reading your documentation, but I don't always have the full thing of like, did this help? I can kind of like infer it, but it's just like, yeah, I think, yeah, rather than focusing on like how much time spent, it's just like giving the time and then celebrating that like, yeah, this is working.
Side question for you. How do you maintain that data though? Is there a chance that it's getting outdated, or is there a chance it becomes wrong later?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's like, it's wrong all the time. I think that's where I wish I had that extra part, is like, did this solve your problem? And like, I think there's some good ways to infer this. The tools are just, they don't quite have them today. Is that like, you know, I think if the question came in through the ticketing system and we suggested you the answer and we know that you didn't need additional help, then I know the documentation worked. Where it's like, when we don't have that closed loop, I kind of just have to like take this other proxies of this that is like, okay, I know someone's reading it, and I know that we seem like we're not getting a lot of, like, I know that, you know, for that example, like MFA article, that like lots of people are reading the MFA article and we're getting less MFA tickets. So something is working, and it's either we designed a really easy to use system, which win, or we had really good documentation, and also a win.
Yeah, I think for me, yeah, there's really no good system overall. I think one thing that is always a challenge at companies is that there is a SaaS sprawl where there could be several different applications that are doing the same thing. And then they also announce new features that also duplicate existing features. And so it gets confusing. It honestly gets confusing. And then there's all these challenges about budgets. Who's going to pay for it? And how much do we want to spend? And Slack has some light, very, very, very light project management functionality within the application. but it doesn't replace like Asana, for example, or Trello at this time. I doubt it'll really fully flush out, but it's getting into that. And so, the challenge is what do end users actually use, and how can we empower them? And I think it's definitely very challenging, and really you have to. I don't know. I think it's really just a combination of understanding your stakeholders, meeting with them, understanding, do we want to pay for multiple systems? Do we want to, and have the resources to manage that? Like, there's a lot of challenges depending on what company you work with too.
I know budget sometimes plays a part in that too. If you could say we're spending X amount of money on this and X amount on that, and they do the same thing, and everybody has access to both and whatever. I realize now, if I can answer your direct question more directly, I realize why I didn't have a good answer is because a lot of our documentation efforts is so new that because it's so new, it's actually directly relevant to everything we have right now. And so it's all current right now. And so I had a hard time auditing this because it was so new. But when I was hearing the answers from both of you, there's almost like the miniature CSAT on the documentation itself, right? It's the questions like, did this documentation help you? Yes or no? And if we get no's, then you actually have an actionable thing to take some documentation out or go fix it. Did that kind of touch upon it?
I think just to add a little bit, one of the things that I remember seeing, so I think more specifically around like looking at the feedback of the answers to when an article, for example, if you have some documentation that's available, that's like provided as an answer, looking at that as a signal is sometimes good, but then it's kind of hard to tell if it's not the right answer for this specific case, or it's not the right answer because this content is just aged out or whatever. So it's an interesting thing where it's like with more data, with more requests, with more of articles coming up, I think it becomes better. But I think with smaller data, which I think in general, like with these types of requests, it's not usually that articles are surfaced up many times unless it's common stuff like Wi-Fi passwords or something that's common. So it's interesting that like I think there's a little bit of like a problem of small data when you try to just use that data, just like the feedback, like that kind of thing. I mean, I think it's still an important metric, but I think another thing that I remember seeing was like Guru was, if you ever saw Guru, they had this thing where it's like you create a card and then you have the card owner, and then it would say like after like 6 months it would ping the owner and say, hey, is this content still relative? And I remember hearing, not that I did this, a lot of people, but like a couple of people were telling me, it's like, yeah, we just ignore those things all day. So there's different, I think different people are taking different strategies in this one, but it's not necessarily going too far. But I think, yeah, it sounds like there's definitely a need in it. I don't know if you kind of know of anything better. But in any case, I think we're, if anybody has any questions, we're going to be around for a while. We're networking, first of all. So thank you, first of all, to our panel for awesome stuff, awesome questions or awesome answers. And also, want to thank you to Box. Where did Dan go? Or out in the back hiding. So thank you to Box for sponsoring us and letting us use this beautiful office.